It is disorganized play. It is disorganized play. It's time for hashtag cheer. Hashtag cheer. This is disorganized play. This is disorganized play. Get ready to face your fears.
Oh, okay. Woo! That, I think Harold pooped a little bit.
I walked out of my bedroom today.
Good.
And I said, hey, look, honey, it's Iron Man. And my wife said, I don't know who that is. And I said, oh, you know, there's a movie we can watch that'll be on. And she was like, oh, why did I say that? Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very black metal disorganized play this week. I am your very white host, Tom Lommel. I am joined here by my very white co-host, Dom Zook.
Yeah.
And so for those of you who are not familiar, every Wednesday, I run a game of the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition here on Saving Throw Show. And every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, we get together to talk about what, a little bit of what happened in the show, and a little bit of what's coming up, like what sort of issues do I have in mind as I'm going to sit down and prepare for the actual events of that session. So that's the purpose of the show. Thank you so much for joining us. We had, I should say, parenthetically, we had a terrific show last week, 2.5 hours talking about how to be a beginner DM with me and the gracious Jennifer Kretschmer, who was so kind to come in and share her perspective and her approach to DMing and giving her advice for first-time GMs. So that'll be up on the Saving Throw Show YouTube channel soon, but you can go back.
It's up there now.
Oh, it's up there now.
Yeah.
In the time that I have showered and shaved, it has made its way over onto the internet. Both things take 2.5 hours. Don't ask why it takes me so long to shave, because I only spend 7 minutes in the shower. So you can go back and check that out. I highly encourage you to do so even if you are not a beginner GM. I thought it was a great.
No, yeah, it's a lot of good info for beginner GMs, but just in general, it's just sort of nice to hear a couple of experienced GMs just kind of going through what their you know, she's a level 4, you're just a level 3, but that's fine.
One day I'll make it.
Talking about, you know, just some tips and tricks of how to like sort of speed things along and get things going fast. And I think every GM can use...
Can I get some of those? Because I feel like I need... How to get things going fast and speed things along is not something we've seen on this latest story arc of the Iron Keep Chronicles.
It's true.
I have no illusions about that. That's
it's been RP heavy, I think is the diplomatic way of saying that. But
I also think the players are just getting to know their characters, right? I was thinking about this today, actually, because I'm like, we have 5 episodes left. I don't know. I'm trying to think like how I can strategically truncate this adventure to fit in 5 sessions, and I'm not sure that we can get there without dramatically kind of editing it down.
Sure.
Which, I don't know. You know, does that matter? You got me. But that's kind of the timeline that we're working on. But I was also like, what this means to me is that, like, if we were to end this in 5 weeks, I feel like everybody's still just getting to know their characters. I don't think they would be ready to, like, go, oh, okay, well, that was fun. Like, let's not play another adventure with this party.
Sure.
I think they're just getting their feet wet and their appetites honed for even more adventure. So to me, that's like, oh, well, we still have places to go. Even if we take this adventure and decide to compress it dramatically,
sure,
that's fine.
Yeah.
We can fit something else out.
Yeah.
So let's talk about today's agenda. We've got a few things on. Wow, I pointed right to it. Okay,
yeah, that's good.
So we're going to give a little recap of what happened 2 weeks ago because neither of us remember. We're going to talk about the battle that's coming up, specifically the SITREP map versus Theater of the Mind. That's what a TOTM is. Opponent or opponents, hard to say. Allies or ally. Or no one? It can't be no one because chat unlocked a thing that a potential enemy turns into an ally. So there's going to be some allies in this fight. And then something that I very cleverly named levers and shakers. Sort of like movers and shakers.
Sort of. I get it.
So let's run it down. Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us to the show.
That's good. That's English. Those are all words in the English language.
Good day. I'm Bob McKenzie. This is my brother Doug. So recap of what happened. I don't even know where exactly we start. I'm sure we start with some sort of camping scene because that seems to be how we start every single session as you make camp for the night.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happened. Was last session? Yes, last session was literally the session where we made camp for an hour.
Yep.
And then the fairies showed up.
And rushed everybody
to the tower.
Yeah. You're like, you know what? We're fairies. We can move very fast. We'll just take you.
The worst part was I had planned that, right? And I was like, well, this will be like a good kind of, opportunity. And then the players made a joke about like, well, we're going to just conveniently like cut to what happens in the tower, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, as a matter of fact, cut to, here's what happens in the tower. So Modern Chow makes a very good point in chat here that two of the characters in the party are sort of new to the world, so it's a little tough to push things along because they want to explore everything that's going on. Everything's a revelation to them. And I would argue that that's true of three members of the... Let me just turn this down, off, go away.
There we go.
I think, Jorvin and Lowstorm and Strumthrum are all sort of new to like civilized world a little bit, or this sort of like more, I guess, civilized plot rather than just let's go collect mushrooms and then kill things that are eating mushrooms.
Right.
So, the whole party is a little bit. They've all got their own thing that isn't necessarily tied to the plot. That's my fault. Whatever. That's fine. So, they did take the magic motorboat all the way up to the Tower of Heavens. They met the woman who runs the hostel and had kind of a long... we did learn some interesting things about Alton there, right? Like,
yes.
Apparently Alton is either bisexual or bi-curious or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is... That was it was interesting to me that he's like, I know this guy. He was going to use his moment of heroism to play I know this guy, and it turned out that they were lovers. I did not expect that. That was a great moment.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting.
Yeah, magic motorboat. Yeah, it was basically fairies.
Quicklings showed up and said, we want to repay you for saving our lives. So there was like a dozen of them that whipped up this little whirlpool or little storm of like whirling steam or mist or vapor that lifted the boats up and
hydrofoiled them.
Yeah, hydrofoiled them up the river. Yeah. Which I thought was a really cool visual. And it did kind of like, for me, open up the idea that if you can travel faster than what's stated in the rules for movement, like you really can break a lot of adventures.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know.
And I don't mean like break it necessarily in a bad way. Like to me, it was a very convenient plot device of like we could spend the next 5 sessions just exploring the forest, and I think that.
And in some adventures, that's kind of the point, right? It's like, let's have random encounters through the forest as you go, because it's building the journey there. It's not the destination, it's the journey, as it were.
Yeah. Well, and that is a component to...
Yes, I was just about to say, Incredibles Island moment with Dash. That's exactly it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's not like someone was kicking and pushing them, but yeah, creating a little thing to...
Yeah, a little like funnel of... yeah, it's similar to that. I mean, that is an element that is in this adventure, is a lot of overland travel and what do you encounter along the way and how do you deal with the fact that you're out in the wilderness and whatnot.
Right.
It's not necessarily supposed to be the kickoff, although it permeates the adventure throughout.
Yeah.
But I don't... for our streaming purposes and whatnot, and for my own personal sanity, I don't really enjoy random encounter, the woods are dark and scary. Unless there's a plot being revealed, it doesn't do a whole lot for me or I think for our show.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to play it that way, I gave a rant last week about random encounters, and I've certainly talked about it before, but I just don't, it's a level of realism that I find is unnecessary. And so that's one of the reasons that I sort of sped it along. Although, the flip side of that is, when we started this whole adventure, when we started When a Star Falls, I said I want to have an A story that is the plot of the adventure, and I want to have a B story that is the stuff that's going on in the forest. So unlike kind of a standard roll and see who you encounter and then you kill them and take their 32 gold pieces, there's actually a bunch of stuff going on in the forest that the players don't know about. And what I may end up doing is relegating that to our next adventure arc and picking it up once they complete this mission of, helping the Tower of the Heavens. And I think that may provide kind of some continuity and also be able to explore the things that at this point we're giving short shrift to.
Right.
So we could ostensibly just wind our way through the forest and encounter an interesting adventure and plot thing that's going on. So it's not like in the original adventure where just roll whatever.
Yeah.
You fight some mountain lions and there's a Perryton and whatever.
Right.
So there's that. All right. Anyway, they got to the tower. We learned something about Alton. Trying to remember, they kind of got the idea that something funny was going on with Master Shalfie, right?
Yes.
Like they heard that he'd been killed in a fire, and they heard a rumor that he had been experimenting with demon magic, and that was like somehow he was delving into the arcane arts that no man shall know, and it killed him. And so their natural conclusion then was, oh, okay, so a demon killed him and has replaced all of the monks at the tower. That's sort of what that's where I felt like that's where they got to, right? Because they definitely, like, the final scene is they are invited to have their fortunes read by Master PRs.
Right.
And they're like, oh, okay, so Master PRs is the demon.
Right.
Okay, right?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Master PRs he's the demon, right?
Yeah.
We know he's the demon.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, he leads you through this bizarre fortune-telling ceremony, which was awful. Like, he was making them, like, eat burnt feathers. And it was very, I thought, like, overtly sadistic. But they kept going with it.
Hey, if someone's going to read your fortune, I mean...
I guess. And then I just had this, like, list of, like, bad horoscopes that I had cut and pasted off of a website and started reading them that. And they were like, oh, let me take notes. And I'm like, oh, no, I should have made these shorter. I should have done the fortune cookie ones that I wrote down instead. So at the end, he said, stare into the crystal ball and see your fate, for it will be blood. That's the recap. That's where we left off.
Everything's fine now.
Yeah. So next session, cut to a month later, or years later.
Yeah. 1,400 years later. Cat. Yeah.
We cut to a party of adventurers unsealing the tomb that has their bones, like or whatever, the dungeon or the.
That's what happened to them.
That would be cruel but fun to just start off with. Here's your new characters. We're just gonna play a scene with these guys. Yeah, they wake up in the 80s. I'm not going to be that cruel, although that would be very entertaining, would it not?
That would be good.
Yeah. We left on a cliffhanger. We have no obligation to pick up on a cliffhanger. However, that does blow the rest of our agenda for today's talk, which arguably, it's been blown already, but here we are. Reverse D&D cartoon, they wake up in a child's bedroom in the 80s.
Suddenly they're on a ride that's going to Earth.
Look everybody. It's the Saving Throw Show ride. Oh my god.
They get spit out.
Jock. Blam! Blown to bits. Thank you, Fuckwad.
Thank you, Fuckwad.
All right, so let's talk about, so we're going to start with a battle. Like, I think next session isn't necessarily exclusively a battle, but I think it's got to be a little bit more than the standard 3 rounds and out that I've been aiming to run and have largely been successful with this most recent arc at running, right? They're fresh. They're wearing their equipment ostensibly. So we can kind of let loose on them, right? We can plan. We don't have any real major hindrances or major considerations in terms of balancing this encounter or giving it due consideration when such and such hasn't had a long rest and whatever.
Right.
So let's just sort of like run down what I think the elements are when we're considering putting this battle together. First of all, what's the sit rep? What are the given circumstances of where we left off in the party? Couple things. They think that Master PRs is a demon. In the adventure, I will tell you right now, in the adventure, that's not true. Okay? That's not what happened. Who cares? Like, who cares what happened in the original adventure? Is Master PRs as a demon, is that a more interesting answer or a less interesting answer than Master PRs engineered a coup to take over the Tower of Heavens? I would say it's more epic fantasy, you know, it's more dramatic for him to be, he's not a demon, he's the demon, to be the demon. So yeah, I think that's a good answer. Do we have to redirect them over to, he's just a normal dude with some monk powers who has arranged his political stunt. He saw an opportunity and took his shot. I don't think so. But, so they think that he's the demon. I don't see a reason to change that, but that's me. Secondly, they're at full hit points, full rest, full equipment. They are seated around a table in an alcove that's curtained off, and it's dark, and they just ate all of this weird stuff.
Right.
He could have ostensibly poisoned them. I made them call for Constitution saves, right? So he could have ostensibly poisoned them. That's something that could have happened. I think the only 2 other things that we have to keep in mind is, well, kind of 3 things. One is that Master PRs clearly isn't acting alone, right? I think that his bejeweled comrade, Lurg or whatever, Lurg the Questioner, he's not necessarily trustworthy either, right? He very clearly summoned the party to this audience. He may or may not be involved. You could write him off as innocent. You could, like, he could be like oh no, right? There is the gnomish captain of the guard who is in charge of the tower security. He's potentially involved in all. We said something about how they walk past 2 gnomish guards and the gnomish guards close the doors and seal them in this chamber, and that's that. But if a fight breaks out, I think it's reasonable to expect that the gnomish guards are going to somehow take notice. And then the third and final aspect to the situation, which is not explicitly stated, but happened kind of prior to them having their fortune-telling session, is that they turned Talfi over to the monks, right? So a question in my mind that I want to address is, what's Talfi's situation? What's Talfi's status? Is Talfi fine and getting used to their accommodations and completely clueless about what's going on? Has Talfi been captured and somehow tortured and is in peril and could be used as some sort of like time pressure? We've got to get this person before they steal Talfi's soul or use their soul scribe powers for evil or whatever it is. Or the third option, and again, this sort of follows kind of our best outcome, mixed outcome, worst outcome. We've done the worst and the mixed. I think the best possible outcome is Talfi shows up in some sort of heroic capacity and helps the party defeat the evil that's afoot, right? I think that's one thing that I don't think should be ignored. I think it's worthwhile, since they just spent 5 sessions traveling with Talfi, let's make sure that Talfi has some sort of stake or engagement here. And maybe, you know, where that ends on the spectrum is a chat unlockable kind of thing, right? Where it starts off worst, and, you know, it could be a tip jar thing where Talfi's fate turns around based on where we get in the ladder. I don't know, something to think about, because I'm not married to one particular answer.
Yeah.
That's me. I would like to see Talfi play an active role in defeating whatever's going on. By the same token, I think it could be a really great element of time pressure for the demon to be like, I'm draining power from the last of the monks. Thank you for bringing me fresh meat. And they're like, oh no, we gotta get to the dungeon, we gotta find him, right? So I think both of those outcomes are acceptable. That's something that we'll decide tomorrow when we put the ladder together, but also it's something that I won't like dangle out there as like the high level reward, right? So that's the situation. Those are the given circumstances. I think the final piece of it to consider is, does this fight stay in this little alcove where they're having the fortune-telling reading, right? Like I think one of the first things that you should decide, and this is where we kind of get into map versus theater of the mind, is what sort of location is this encounter going to take place in? And I feel like that's almost more important than picking a monster, right? Ostensibly, like, we've picked a style of monster. We know it's going to be some sort of demon or devil or infernal creature, right? What, some sort of magical evil creature. Let's just think of it that way. Oh man, what if he turns into like just this nightmare unicorn, like a red horn dripping blood? Oh, I love that idea. Wow, you have to find a nightmare unicorn figurine that we can use, I guess.
Well, I have a horse.
You have a horse? All we need is a toothpick.
I mean, it's got a rider on it. So.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. What if all of a sudden he snaps his fingers and then this horse is underneath him? That'd be awesome. You people are supposed to give him the ideas, not Dom. Dom's just here for moral support.
I know, what fool am I to come up with ideas?
To knock out the moral supports is really what it is. Bam, bam, yeah. Yeah, this episode really is the most metal episode of Disorganized Play ever done. But I think, apart from kind of choosing a monster class, having an idea of what the monster is, I think picking the location, making decisions about the location, is honestly one of the most important things. Which, do we stay in this hall? You know, we have a map somewhere that tells us what this place looks like, and it's sort of like, I pictured it as a series of alcoves with a main chamber and then a set of double doors that goes off into the monks' studies and quarters and library and Tower of the Heavens and all that kind of garbage, right? The real residence of the tower. This is just sort of like a grand hall receiving room where they do their fortune-telling readings. So does it stay in that location, or does it turn into kind of like a running fight, like we've got to get to the dungeon as quickly as possible and kind of fight your way into the dungeon and save him before the ritual is complete? I don't know. I like that idea. The problem with that is, how do you convey to the players, okay, this is what is happening and this is the way you need to go to save Talfi or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, unless the guy runs away or he goes through a secret door, and you see him leave and be like, ah ha ha, like, if he's a demon, he should just teleport. And when that happens, then everybody goes, well, we don't know where he went.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns into what happens is you feel like as the DM, it's going to turn into this great chase scene where you're like, oh yeah, the party's going to take off. But in my experience, what generally happens is the party goes, did we see where he went? You're not sure. We're check for secret doors. You don't find any. We're going to look behind that. Well, wait a minute. No, we know there's guards behind that door. Okay, everybody, and all of a sudden it goes into timeout mode, and then they all huddle up, and it just sucks all of the urgency out of the entire, and then they're like, well, we don't honestly know whether we're being led into a trap or on a rescue mission, so why don't we take this, at a cautious, leisurely pace, and pursue this goal with some deliberation, rather than run willy-nilly into the dungeon. And you're like, but in the movies, they run willy-nilly into the dungeon, that's what they do! You're not in the movies.
This is real life, kid.
So, yes, that's.
I don't know if I want to see what that.
Dear,
what that is.
Dear Amazon.com. Don't go to any link that is everychina.com. Unicorn Mask Nightmare Cosplay.jpg. Estelle Castillo, I don't know why you're trying to do this to Dom's brain and eyeballs, but I will not be a party to it. I will not.
Well, I can't get it because I didn't have it open on my thing.
Yeah, it went by already. Too bad for you. That's what you get for not following along with our friends on the other side of the internet. So, so that is one decision. Is like, where is this fight going to take place? Right?
I didn't have it.
He still didn't have it open. Dom, tell everybody when you're in the chat.
I will.
So decide maybe a better way to put this is like decide what style of fight this is going to be. If it's going to be a standoff battle, if it's going to this kind of covers several elements. If it's going to be a fight where things come in waves, if it's going to be a chase or retreat, those are some major ways to look at what kind of is it grab the try to unlock the MacGuffin, kind of a countdown kind of thing, whatever. Oh no, Boulder Parchment Shears.
Hey.
Ambush.
How's it going?
Yeah, it could be an ambush. I thought you were just making a chat comment. Ambush.
Yeah.
It is an ambush. We know that. All right. So, to address this next point though, do we want to use the battle map or do we want to use Theater of the Mind? And from my perspective, we've done an awful lot of Theater of the Mind so far, exclusively, as a matter of fact, right? Stumpomatic says I could have them see the ritual taking place in the dungeon and then have the bad guys go into a Dr. Evil monologue about how they do not have time to save her. Oh, see it in the orb. That's a great idea. I really like the idea that he disappears and they see what's happening in the orb. They still have to find a way to be able to like find that location, right?
Yeah.
But that's a very clever idea. I really appreciate like that the hook there being seeing the ritual in the orb. I think that's a terrific incorporation of what our given circumstances are, as well as a great hook and motivation for them. Like find Talfi, and it also acts as kind of a
that's pretty much it.
The problem is if I
thanks.
If
I'm
I show up
out of the chat again
in that mask, it's just going to be a stream of me alone talking about what a great D&D game I had planned until I wore this mask to my game, and everyone left.
Yeah.
Then it was like, nope. Wow.
Right.
I'm parachuting out of this tragic, disturbing, awkward mess. No, thank you. So yeah, I agree with Estelle Castillo. I think we need to do minis somehow because we've used Theater of the Mind so much, and also because they have those Heroes Forge minis, we want to give.
Well, I don't know if they'll be here because they're still.
Or are they still making them?
With Iron. They're not making them, but Iron Tusk is
painting. Oh, he's painting them.
So our good buddy Iron Tusk is painting.
Aha, I see. All right. Well, regardless, we haven't done anything on the battle mat, right? We haven't done any actual gridded combat.
And I think we actually have Wizard Tower combat mats.
Well, so that's. I'd like to see that. I don't know. Do you have it? Do you have it someplace where you can easily get at it?
Let me see. If I don't have it, Gaurav has it.
You take a look at it. The other thing that I was going to say is because this is such an old school dungeon, and because everything is sort of laid out in, I don't want to say like a traditional dungeon format, right? Like it's a traditional architectural structure. It's not what I would consider to be maybe a little bit more weird fantasy stuff like you've seen in the past 5 or 10 years, right? Yeah, don't worry, we're definitely going to do some sort of minis. But because it is, well, let's take a look at what we do have. Oh, wow. So we have a whole, these are the Arknight ones, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have a whole, each one of these represents a level.
Yeah.
Right? Not too shiny. Not too shiny.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I want to look too. So that's like a study. The previous one was like a library,
yeah,
right? Mm-hmm. This is, yeah, this looks like a study. This could be used for the fortune telling area. Mm-hmm. This is living quarters. This is living quarters. So it's clear to me that it is almost kind of. This is the rest. Yeah, this is the lowest level.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Does it have 2 doors? It has a door on the side down here, and then it has a door on the side over here. Ostensibly, it looks like the other side could also be. Oh, these are the nighttime versions. Is that what that is?
Well, no, they have.
No.
Some of them have different things on the back.
Yeah, this is another level of a tower that you could use.
Yeah.
This is not. This is just like a square.
Here's another. Like this
is a square area.
This is like a larder or something like that. This has a bunch of.
Can you reach this one? No.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, this is great. This is like a potion area or something like that, right? These are from Arknight, ARC.
ARC-KNIGHT. Yeah.
IGHT.
Arknight.
I like the size that they are because it's a good size for one combat, right? If you were going to have one fight, it's a big enough area that you could have a fight in it and have some monsters that are large or take up a bunch of space without having to worry about it getting too cramped. On the other hand, what I also like about it is like it's basically divided into 4 areas. Like this is a relatively manageable number of areas.
Yeah.
Right. So we could use this. I'm a little concerned about we'll have glare off of the lights so that it may not read as well on the table as it does when we're holding it up like this.
From the ISO camera, I don't think we'd have that issue.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So who knows?
But, yeah.
We could use that. What I was getting at earlier before we pulled this magical stuff out, because I didn't really realize that we had this, I do like the fact that you could swap between levels. Then you go up, then you go up, then you go up, and then, oh, there's an ogre there. Oh, then we fight him, then we go up, then we go up, or we go down, whatever it is. I really like that idea. But if we're going to stick in just the fortune-telling area, we could build that entire area beforehand with Dwarven Forge.
Yep.
Right?
Awesome.
And we've got the Dwarven Forge pieces for it, and we could put that together, and it would, again, be a decent size to host like a larger combat and some multiple creatures or waves of creatures and whatnot. But it definitely gives you that immersive feel of like, oh, this is what it's really like.
Yeah.
Right? So I think those are some good options. So obviously, we've done so much theater of the mind that I don't think we need to use it in this case. I'm not saying that it can't make a good format for a centerpiece combat, but I want to do something that's a little stickier in terms of moving things around, a little more tactical and just a little less. You know, somebody made an interesting point. If you don't follow Rob Donahue on Twitter, I suggest you do, because he thinks a lot about what, like, the theories of gaming, like what gaming theory is. And he retweeted a thing about something called triangle theory. And I'm not going to get into all the details, but the interesting thing that it applied to gaming was, or that it talked about with gaming is, if we're using theater of the mind, and I describe the room and I describe what's happening, I have a copy of what's happening in my brain. That's sort of like, as the DM, that's the master copy, right? But then you have your own interpretation based on, ow, fuck.
Tom just...
I just biffed myself in the face.
You're fine.
You have your own interpretation based on what you heard and or paid attention to and or are picturing. Like if I say there's a catapult in the room, do you think of that as like a small contraption, a giant siege engine? Like what does that look like? Well, you have your own idea in your brain. Or, you know, the classic one is if I say there's a giant centipede in the room, do you picture something that's 15 feet tall or 2 feet tall? Right? So you have your own copy, and then she has her own copy, and he has his own copy, and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And at some point, you have to... What will happen is you'll have to check in either with the GM or as the GM, because when you start to get out of sync with what the brain picture is, you start to act in a way that I don't expect.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to climb on top of the giant centipede. No, it's only 2 feet tall. You can't, like, you could step on it, you know, but Rob Donahue is our Donahue. Very good. Thank you, Estelle Castillo.
Oh, got it already. Okay, cool.
He tweets all kinds of, he'll also get you into backpacks and pens and notebooks, so be careful. He's a kindred spirit in that respect. But he's always tweeting about RPG theory stuff, and he is one of the founders of Evil Hat, so there you go. But, so that's what happens is when you're playing Theater of the Mind, we each have our own kind of working copy in memory of what the thing is, and if you say something that all of a sudden we realize, oh, you didn't hear what I said, or you missed out on something that I said, or you're just plain interpreting this differently than what I said.
Right.
Okay, now we have to take a moment and sync back up. Which is just sort of like like literally a moment of cognitive dissonance in the game between the GM and one or more of the players. So that's the nice thing about using gridded combat is everybody can get on the same page about, or they can you'll have moments like that too where people will go, well, wait a minute, is this mini actually, is it 4 squares or is it 1 square? It takes up all 4 squares. Oh, okay. Is it actually this giant drow thing? No, it's actually this lumbering claw demon, but I don't have one of those. I just have this drow guy. Oh, okay. So, there's there's that. So that's what I like about going into a set piece kind of on the grid, whether that's with Dwarven Forge or a battle mat, or you draw it out, or gaming paper or whatever. Like it focuses everybody's attention and also helps crystallize the details, right? And crystallize the description. And in fact, I can kind of get away with doing less description because I go, you are in a giant castle in the sky. Bam.
Sure. Yep.
And they're imagining all of this stuff that I don't have to describe because they see that there's 4 spires and these walls that are made out of water and this giant throne that's made out of geysers. And I can literally say those 2 sentences and they have this grandiose picture in their head of like, oh, that's what that must really be like, right? So, all right, I've talked way too much about whether we should use a more representational model or a more kind of narrative literary one. Let's move on to opponent or opponents. Now, the reason I say opponents is I think it's dangerous to construct any kind of set piece combat in 5e around a solo monster, right? I really think that every D&D party that's played by even marginally experienced players outguns a single creature.
Yeah.
Just by virtue of the fact that they have a minimum of 4 actions, but generally 4 to 8 actions to every 2 that the monster does, right? Because you can generally figure like, we're gonna get to levers and shakers. Stick with us,
Malkara Darkwell.
Malkara Darkwell. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you haven't missed anything.
We're almost there. We're almost there.
Yeah. So as BSB Care points out, that if you have one monster, your party's just going to dump on it, right? I'm reading Christian Linky's comment. I remember the moment in 3E when in our second session we had to shift to using minis. Due to cost constraints, we used cardboard heroes. It was when one of the players asked, am I flanking? And I said, sure. But the players wanted to actually see it so they could make more and more exploits. I mean, that's the other part of a representational model is like if you're using a system that is very gritty and it offers those sorts of moves, then you almost have to play right? in that respect. And the flip side of it is in 5e where there is no such thing as flanking, you will still hear people go, "Am I flanking? Because I'm right next to that. I'm on the other side of that guy," and you're like, "It's not. There's not. That's not a thing."
Yeah.
So we're going to environmental challenges are part of our levers and shakers. So opponents, I think it's important to think about whether we use a solo opponent, if there is a mob of other guys or mooks that kind of like act as either cannon fodder or a defensive shield, however you want to position them, or do you use them as waves of reinforcements? If you decide to bring in waves of reinforcements, do you start them off soft and like, here come the kobolds, and then bring in the giant ogre guy with the whip that has like iron spikes in it, who is obviously kind of like the lieutenant boss that you've got to defeat, etc. So you have to think about how do you want to structure that? And some of it is you will have characters who are support characters whose main job is to just stand back and kind of artillery in their hits and their actions. And that's fine, but I think it undercuts the drama, and it certainly makes a little bit of a weak point on the tank. Like the tank becomes a choke point, and that's intentional by the tank's design. But also, if you balance that combat wrong, then the tank goes down, but the support characters are all at full hit points, and that tank character kind of has to like, James V, 20 months.
Nice. Well, almost to the 2-year mark.
Oh my. God. Dom, come on now. I just shaved off my old gray man's beard. Thank you, James V. I'll take that reroll.
Okay.
Write
that
I'm gonna
down.
write down reroll.
Reroll for Tom.
Roll for Tom.
He'll use it in a good way.
Via James V. Thank you.
It's just don't tell Amy, because you know Amy will be like, "Can I have that reroll?"
She'll be like, Tom, why are you getting rerolls?
Yeah.
Because I'm a level 3 dungeon master. I get one for each level.
It's true. I don't know where you're getting the other two, but
Thank you. Very good. So I think it's important to not necessarily make all threats equal.
Yeah.
But it applies some drama and pressure to the support characters and helps kind of like raise the stakes in the adventure when everybody's a little bit threatened by something.
Right.
Now, as was pointed out earlier, you don't have to threaten them with a monster. You can threaten them with something else. We'll get to that. But think about the opponents. Do you want to have one big bad? I'm not saying that it is bad to have one big bad, but the challenge is different than if you have multiple creatures, and because typically what happens is the party focus fires on one guy to take him out, and meanwhile the second guy can just kind of wreak havoc, right? So it's a different blend of threat. You just gotta make a mental picture of like, okay, what can I do to change things up and make it different for the party?
yeah.
Because you don't, I don't care which way that you go. Right. So James V points out if I have 8 players and I put one thing in front of them, it's done in 2 rounds, just over, right? And if that's the kind of combat you want to have, that's fine. Or if you really decide, okay, well, I'm gonna put one thing in front of them, but I've got to super juice the hit points, that's fine too. But you want to make sure that it's not monotonous for the party, right? So one of the most important considerations is over the span of the combat, is it an interesting series of events all the way through? So, likewise, I think allies. I personally have trouble with allies in a set piece combat because allies tend to fulfill one of two functions, or they tend to play out in one of two ways. 3 ways. 3 ways that allies tend to get used in a big set piece combat. They either become like a potential sacrificial victim. I gotta save this guy. They become like a one-shot thing where they come in, they do their cool thing, and they're like, I'm spent, and then maybe they transition to sacrificial victim type of thing.
Right.
Or even worse, you just end up ignoring them. And then the party's like, well, what does he do? And you're like, I don't know, you're already kicking the guy's ass. So I mean, and they're like, well, can't he do, like, doesn't he have extra attack? Can't he do a trip attack and then, like, hit him when he's down on the ground? And like, yeah, but you don't really need that help, you know, etc. And then the third thing is they just kind of tend to be used as cannon fodder. Like, they're kind of disposable. They don't play a valuable role whatsoever. They just sort of get in the way, right? And it's kind of like the worst thing about allies in a combat is when people go, well, what about this guy? Or they start jockeying for what his move should actually be.
Right.
Well, why wouldn't he do this? Sometimes that's okay. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. He's that smart. Sometimes it's like, let me play the NPCs. They're my NPCs.
Yeah, seriously.
As Modern Chess says, can he heal me? Why doesn't he do something? Why doesn't he just heal me?
Yeah.
They can be useful in taking off some of the pressure on a party that has, doesn't have a dedicated healer or needs some magic or needs maybe, whatever it is, help diffusing traps and that sort of stuff. So they can be helpful, but more often than not, I get frustrated, especially with animal companions, where I'm like, all right, your animal companion is really sort of like 2/3 of a PC here, and that means your round takes twice as long, and I have to try and do 3 times as many hit points because you do twice as much damage. So, as S. Del Castillo points out, as long as cool things happen during the length of the combat, it doesn't matter much what any of these things are. And that sort of brings us to our final topic, which I call levers and shakers. That constitutes 2 things. So, what does that mean? Levers, or levers, I'm also an American, by birth, as a matter of fact.
Did you run this by your wife first? And that's how
Yeah, that's right. That's why I say levers. I also say progress and parkade.
Do you say weekend?
I say weekend, and all of my squares are 3-meter squares. Levers are things that are in the environment that the party can take advantage of or be affected by through their action or through actions of the enemy, right? And whether that's an environmental effect where I can dump, burning oil on a particular area, or hey, the dwarf stands on top of the catapult and I cut the thing and fling him, across the moat at the guys, or whatever it is, like something that they can manipulate, or the bad guys can likewise manipulate. Maybe it's a magic pillar that gives off an aura, and anybody who's standing within 10 feet of it gains resistance to piercing damage or whatever it is. Okay, well, as long as I can get close to it, right? It's that sort of stuff. So those are what I consider levers in a combat. What are the interactive elements in the environment that give the players an opportunity to be inspired and go, oh, wait a minute, okay, so, where's my cool sheet here? It's this one. Oh, okay. So wait, is all this stuff really on this table here? Yeah, of course. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Is all this, all this stuff really on this table? Yeah, of course it is. What does it look like? Oh, it's a bunch of nasty chemicals. Does any of it look flammable? Okay. Yes, it looks flammable. I'm gonna dump the table over. Okay, great. Ostensibly, I have invented this moment of heroism that allows players the narrative control to do, engage those elements and create those elements on their own. But it doesn't hurt to have some baked in to your combat, right? So those are things that I call levers or levers. And I think they're part of the key of making the environment another aspect of the combat or another opponent or ally in the combat, right? So it's a dynamic element that both the players and the bad guy can take advantage of. The second thing that I call shakers is more directly related to over the life of the combat, over the length of the combat, something interesting is happening, right? And what I mean by shakers is these are things that shake up the given circumstances of the situation. So like the classic thing right at the top of the encounter tonight, one of the shakers will be he transforms, tomorrow night, will be he transforms from a ostensibly normal looking human to a bizarre demon who maybe he grows a claw arm or he has, aura of fire or whatever. So one of the shakers is, he changes form. Other things that you might see as classic kind of like shakers would be like in a wave type combat. Okay, he summons, he reaches down and, he reaches out with his hand and it's enveloped in a crackling black nimbus of eldritch energy. And when he closes his fist, the slain bodies of his 3 compatriots who are lying bleeding on the ground suddenly rise up as zombies or skeletons or whatever it is. Okay, that shakes things up. Oh, we have a new threat, introduces a new threat, changes the pace of things, raises the stakes in whatever way it might be, right? And those are kind of, I would say, probably the 2 main functions of these shaker type things is to either change the pace or raise the stakes or introduce a new threat, a maybe even more greater threat. It's exactly like BSB Care says, it's exactly like video games where you get the boss at half health and something happens. Right. And so many times we say like, the great thing about D&D is it's not a video game. Well, first of all, video games are inspired by D&D, but secondly, there's been a lot of iteration on what makes a fun battle in video games. Like I look at Diablo and I go, well, because all they have is this combat package of stuff, there's no role-playing to speak of other than you observe performances by the voice actors. But they just have battles. So they have to figure out a way in World of Warcraft that all of a sudden that guy tips over and becomes more powerful. He summons more minions. He causes the floor to catch fire or turn into magma or whatever it is, right? And so I feel like in these set piece combats, we have an opportunity to steal from those things that we've seen in video games. It's not necessarily something that's baked into the game. If I look at the stats for a Cloud Giant, you're like, oh, okay, well, they can cast Gust of Wind or they can smash with their Morning Star. Those are fine options, but they're not evocative to me, right? It's not as evocative as saying the Storm Giant, the Cloud Giant raises a wave of water that gushes up out of the fountain and crashes into one of the PCs. To me, all of a sudden, we've now left the traditional realm of Dungeons and Dragons and gone into like, oh, this is really flavorful. Mechanically, it may be exactly the same as a Gust of Wind, but flavor-wise, the players are like, oh, they can do that? That's great. So it's that sort of stuff. So yeah, raising the stakes, introducing a new threat, changing the pace of combat, hopefully making it quicker and not making people go, oh, well, you're doing great until we introduce, why did you introduce that 7th doppelganger? That did not need to happen. That's where you're really playing kind of like, you're playing with fire in a manner of speaking. Of introducing new combatants. They have to have a different feel. And it has to feel like the adventure is or the combat is building to some sort of resolution.
Right.
Otherwise, you just feel like you're staring down the death spiral of like hit points lower, attacks the same. You know, the second part of this that loops back into the levers thing is if you recontextualize things for the monsters, you can also recontextualize things for the players so that they have something interesting to manipulate or take advantage of.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, they come rolling in with these casks of alchemist fire and they start lobbing them at you. Well, guess what? They're also standing next to casks of alchemist fire. Okay, great. That gives the player inspiration of a way to take advantage of something that's in the environment that's a lot more interesting than what they could normally do. But they go, I'm going to fire my crossbow at it, you know, and I'm going to light an arrow and shoot it at it. That's a class, you know.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the, I don't know if it's the core design principle, but I want to say it's definitely a technique that you should try to consider to deploy. It's definitely a technique you should consider deploying anytime you want to make a set piece combat is what elements can I introduce that are going to make the next round more interesting? And the great thing about them is you can edit them out, right?
Yeah.
If it gets to be too much and your players are like, well, I don't even know how we're supposed to win this thing. That's a bad sign. But it also, if you have these dynamic elements, the thing about an element that's dynamic is it can also just go dormant. And as long as the players don't take it for like a fake hook and go, I pull on that thing, what happens? Right. Oh, nothing happens. But if you don't describe it, you know, if you don't introduce it, if you keep it in reserve and go, oh, you know what, they're not going to come in with those barrels. We need to get this over with, and if anything, I'll have them notice like there's a net or something. I don't know. You know, like you can change it, but you can hold stuff in reserve. So you can make a list of things that could be interesting to deploy, and then in real time make decisions about, okay, how's this fight going? Do I want it to go another 20 minutes, or do I want to kind of see how this last round rounds out, and then that's that.
Right.
You know? So, those are all of the elements that I can't think of anything else that I would consider. What I like about the levers and shakers element is that everything else is very much sort of by the book and is very much, I don't want to say rules bound, but falls into the tendency where you think of just like what's in the rules, right? So when you look at a monster, you go, oh, okay, this is an Aaron yes. It has, according to the stat block, it has these attacks and it has these abilities, and you think to yourself, at least this is the way I look at it. I go, well, it's not real interesting. Maybe I can find a monster that's like this that does something cooler, you know. But the thing about all of those things, other than levers and shakers, is you tend to just sort of like fall into what's in the book, what's on the page, and use it as is. Obviously, you know, an advanced DM technique is to reskin monsters or to swap out an ability and make it a little bit more interesting, right? Kind of like I was talking about reskinning the Cloud Giant where the gust of wind turns into a wave of water. Mm-hmm. Sure, you can do that. That's cool. And that's easy to do. But you tend to just like look at the rules and look at the books and fall into the habit of using whatever you find.
Right.
With levers and shakers, you have to think about all of the other elements, the location, the bad guy or bad guys, the allies that may be there, what the dimensions of your map are and whatnot. You take all of those things and then you layer a layer of imagination on top of it, right? So you go, okay, let's get rid of this one. We've used it already. So we look at our library, and I go, oh, what are some cool things that I could use in my library? Well, you know, knocking the stacks over, being able to knock the stacks over, that would be one cool thing. And this, I don't know, you know, maybe this isn't a support column. Maybe this is a ladder that you can climb up on top of here for some reason. All right, well, let's put like a chandelier up here or some sort of like standing lamps on each of these corners. And now all of a sudden, well, that would be great if there was a chandelier over the middle and you could kind of swing from side to side or get up on top of this thing and shoot down and into the rows of books and whatnot. So when you think about introducing these dynamic elements that the players can take advantage of, or that the allies can take advantage of, you know, oh, maybe there's someone in this back room area. Maybe this is curtained off and they can't see into here. This is covered up. Okay, and then in round 2, guess who comes out? Da-da, etc. So what it does is it shakes you out of what I would consider a kind of like recipe or cookbook kind of format where you're just, and I do this all the time, so I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but you're just sort of, you know, I'll flip through the monster manual and see, okay, well, you know, I don't know, Kuatoa, I like those man catcher things. What do they have? Here's a net. I thought they had something else. Oh yeah, that's on this page. Oh yeah. But you kind of get stuck on, well, I've used that before. I've used that. That's not interesting. They know what that is. I use that. So you break out of that habit and you enter a world of purely creation and inspiration. And I think that brings a certain freshness to your DMing and to your set piece combat that may not be there if you don't consider those type of elements. Modern Chow says, as a DM, would you ever roll for a lever or shaker if a PC comes up with something that might be evident in the map? My basic advice would be no. Like, that's the 101 advice, is don't roll for it, just go with it, and go, yes, that rack of potions is bubbling, and there's a burner underneath, and it looks like it's very, you know, very flammable. Go for it. That's the case where, for beginner DMs, I'd say just yes and that thing, right? Contrary to that advice, I roll for this stuff all of the time, right? So oftentimes, the players will pose a question to me, and you will see me pick up 2 6-siders and roll for it. And what I'm doing is I'm using the most elemental, powered by the apocalypse move of rolling 2d6. I used to roll a d20 or a d6 and just roll high or low. And if it was low, it was no. And if it was high, it was yes, right? And it kind of drives my old players crazy because they're like, just make a decision. But I like to be inspired by the dice, right? What I've come to deploy instead is a powered by the apocalypse move where on a 6 or lower, it's not what the person thinks, it's worse. If it's a 7 to 9, it works like that, but not the way that they expect. And if it's a 10 plus, then yes, that's exactly what it does. Mm-hmm. And regardless of what they ask me, whether it's about a thing in the room or a bit of lore that they know, do I recognize these guys? Well, if there's no applicable skill check to tell me, then I will just roll and use this 6 minus, 7 to 9, 10 plus, to inform my response as the DM. And what that does for me is it gives me a broader range of options to answer with. I don't just answer yes or no, absolutely, da-da-da-da. I'm forced by the convention of the dice roll and the result to come up with something more nuanced, more interesting than just a simple yes or no. Right. So to answer your question, if they said that, I would roll a powered by the apocalypse roll, I don't know, a move, I guess you want to call it, or whatever, and interpret the result, and then give the answer. So it gives me a broader range of interpretation. And I know, I do want to address something. I saw that Christian Linke brought this up a while back of, there's some games that are just D20 games, and use them as D20 games and try not to, if you want to play Powered by the Apocalypse, play Powered by the Apocalypse, and et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But some people just love the straightforward binary result of D&D. Now, that's true. I 100% agree. I would also add a caveat, though, that the more that you practice giving a range of responses, of thinking of what's the worst possible result for the party that's still actionable, what does a mixed success look like? Unqualified success is pretty easy, right? But but those two things, what's a mixed success look like? Okay. The more that you practice that, the better you get at describing and dealing with curveballs that your players throw at you, or situations that you don't feel fully prepped for. You're better able to improvise in the moment when you apply those principles more often. Now, I would agree that not every player is ready to do that on their own terms, like in their own head. There's oftentimes, like, I will play some sort of quote-unquote story game with players who come from a D&D background, and they can't handle it, right? Like, they're like, what? Like, I could just decide that I know what this is? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's to keep me from cheating? Nothing. That's, we're just establishing a fiction. Eventually, you're going to roll something that is not going to be in your favor. You're not cheating then, so.
Yeah.
So that's how I decide whether an element on the map that the players look at, that's how I personally, that's one of my level 3 DM techniques, is I'll make a Powered by the Apocalypse move and then give them an interpreted response on what that thing actually is. If you roll a 6-, you're still sort of stuck with, oh, what's this bad? Why do I have to say no to them? What, that's the real challenge, though. I think that's the most valuable part of Powered by the Apocalypse is I have to say no to you in a way that is interesting and actionable.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. I think, and if you want to have more control over what they see, then just make your own, right? I think that's a powerful technique to use when you're using things that are pre-built like this, and gives you some sort of, without having to intricately say what each of these things are, you can kind of in the moment go like, okay, yeah, no, these are chemicals and some of them are flammable. Oh yeah, one of these looks like the components of a health potion here. If you mix them all together, you might get a health potion, Mm-hmm. Things like that. I
will tell you, I'm sorry, you want to finish your thought?
Oh, I was just going to say, like, if you wanted to have a little bit more leeway, or make it so that they're not focused on, like, okay, well, I want to crack that barrel open because I want to know what's, okay, we're not going to crack every barrel open. But then, like, you can take this and just, Tom's a fan of tracing paper, but just go over this with paper and mark out, okay, I like the general layout here, but I don't like everything that's in here, or I just want an open room or whatever. And then you can make it do your own stuff, and then you don't even have to
put it on your scanner at home, Photoshop it, erase the stuff you don't like, and drop your own. I was going to say, go along with what you said, my problem with a room like this is I have players who are like, okay, what's in this barrel?
Yeah.
That's a cask of nails. Mm-hmm. What's in this barrel? That's a cask of screws. Okay, what's in this barrel? That is a cask of 2x4s because I'm out of building materials. I don't know what else, And some of that can be like, that's bad prep, but also like, I don't know. That's sort of,
well, because sometimes
I like to montage that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you search the room and you find the following thing. Well, wait a minute. We only found one. But wait a minute. What's over in here?
Yeah. Well, because sometimes you get into sort of an action paralysis, as it were, and they just want to, like, maybe once they found something. Oh yeah, you find a a health potion or
Right,
something,
yeah.
something like
hidden in
that.
the bottom of this barrel of flour, and carefully wrapped in leather, is a small potion vial. It's bubbling blue fluid.
Right. And then they're like, oh, so there's things in here. Okay. And then they start going and just ransacking, and they're like Link and, breaking everything.
Bam, bam, bam.
Thing. But yeah, video games are in empty boxes, and that's exactly it. You kind of.
I mean, if you can get away with it, I'm inclined at that point to like montage that situation of like, oh, okay, so you decided you're gonna start busting the room apart. Let's make everybody make one big, search check, intelligence check, whatever it is,
right.
And then I will give you some results that matter, rather than kind of the ants marching. Okay, all right, okay. I'm gonna go 5 feet down here. I'm gonna crack this one open.
Yeah.
So
yep.
That's in general. I would say if the players are inspired by something with your map, that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. Whether they're afraid of it or they want to take advantage of it or whatever. The beautiful thing about those moments, and why I would caution you to very rarely say no, that it doesn't work that way, is because they are now taking the job of changing the pace away from you. They're taking it out of your hands and taking it into their own hands, and they're getting more excited and more invested in what's happening. And so they're naturally like raising the stakes and raising their level of interest and investment in the situation. Right. And when your players start to lean in and get excited, don't kind of like knock their legs out from underneath them and go, no, that's nothing.
Yeah.
Try to reward that interest and keep building it, rather than when you say no, that's when you are starting to take the pace down and knock down back their level of interest, and hit it with kind of like you're negating their interest in interest and investment in the situation.
Yeah.
So be careful about that, because what they're doing is they're doing your job, or they're responding to. I mean, they're doing your job without you having to do it. If you put cool stuff on the map and they get invested in it, great, you did a good job of preparing, right? But if you put stuff on the map and they start getting excited about it regardless, I know it's very easy to go, no, that's nothing. I drew a thing in there. It's just a speck.
Right.
Okay, but you're literally kind of like batting back their enthusiasm. And there's generally one thing we don't want in a D&D game or any tabletop role-playing game, and that's less enthusiasm. Tabletop Tales says, there's an interesting question on a D&D forum the other day. A player wanted to know how PCs and GMs handle questions or comments like perception check versus saying, I walk into the room and I'm curious about I curiously look at all the barrels and what could be in them, and the DM responds with make an appropriate skill check. We sort of handled this last week. Because we had a little moment where we talked about players just going, okay, I want to make a check. I want to, and then everybody kind of around the table like, oh, can I check too? Right? We can address it quickly. Don't sweat it. But my response last week remains, I want them to tell me what they're doing. So I want to respond to actions. I don't want to respond to requests for dice mechanics to come into play, because that strips away the level of artifice that creates the fiction, right? The story is not, I rolled a 17, I hit the monster's armor class and do 7 points of damage.
Yeah.
The story is, I step up, I swing my sword, I land a grievous blow, I crack its collarbone, it shrieks in agony, and then it claws me. So you're trying to build the picture, and if you succumb to your players going, can I make a search check? Without describing what they're doing to enact that thing, you're trimming away your ability to create the picture of the world and immerse everyone's imaginations in that. So I think that's, it's fine to say that that's your goal, but I think it's important to go and to not respond to, I want to make a history check, unless they've established what they're doing, what their goal is.
Right.
Intelligence checks are a little bit weird. Like a history check is a little bit weird because the players don't know whether their character has studied something or not, generally, right?
Sure, yeah.
I have ranks in Arcana. Now, if you want to get into like world building and character building, you can say, okay, what would you have studied? What's a lesson that you would have learned that would apply to this situation? And then you can give them the opportunity to like spout some lore about where their character came from or something that they encountered, or maybe even like do a callback to something that they encountered in the campaign. Oh, well, are these like those quickling creatures that we battled down the river? Oh, it is like those, but they seem to be twisted and, they have little horns and fangs instead of like the ones that you encountered. Okay, can I make an Arcana check? Did I have an idea what might have happened here? Sure. That's those intelligence type checks get a little hinky, but definitely like search and perception are the two most like common pitfalls for this type of thing, and I want players to give me specifics. Okay, you're searching the room. What does that mean? Are you going and studying the wall and seeing whether everything? Are you tapping with a pole along the floorboards? Are you lifting things up? Like, what does that mean? You're searching the room. And if they say, I just stand back and give it a gaze.
Okay.
Okay, I will deal with that situation as appropriate, right? I might say, okay, well, I'll give you a perception check. Roll.
Yeah.
Or I'll give you an intelligence investigation check. Or I might say, you haven't seen anything different, so I'm going to give you a check with disadvantage or whatever.
Right.
Or you may know that what they're looking for is not something that can be observed. The wall is made out of, some sort of, is an illusion, right? Well, if it's a perfect illusion, it's not something they're going to see, it's going to be something they're going to feel. So, that's my take on the open-ended question of like, I want to make a check.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's you know what? And James V says you need to get better asking about what they're doing because you just give them some descriptions. That's fine too, right? It's fine to give them a little bit of information and say, if you want to investigate further, tell me something more specific about what you're doing, right? It's not an all or nothing. You can give them some information. Okay, well, it's strange that there's a breeze blowing here because you're very deep underground. But other than that, you don't notice anything unusual.
Yeah.
Now, the nice thing about that is you give them a little bit of information, and now they can go, maybe one of these walls is fake. Let's go around and search the walls. Oh, okay, great. Give me another search check.
I think, as Tabletop Tales says, it's, when do you make the decision as to whether you give them the opportunity to make a roll, to use some sort of ability or something, or do you wait for them to decide to do that? And, I think it's entirely up to the where your players are in their gaming career, if they know that they have these abilities to look for things, and also what you are hoping that they find out of this. If you have a little compartment that you want them to find because it has something in it, and you just go like, yep, the room, there's stonework. and they're just going to be like, okay, well, I'm moving out of this room to the next room. I don't care, you can give them a little bit more. I think, as Tom says, if you give them a little bit of direction, a little bit of description, that can generally go a long way towards sparking their interest about something. And it depends on how you say it, because I've had instances where I've said something and I've made something sound way too, important than it was, and they start getting way too, and you just kind of have to go like, okay, it's really, there's nothing here. and that's just kind of how that goes. But I think if you give them a little nudge, then they'll start going for those things. And as Christian says, yeah, you can make it. You don't have to say, well, give me a perception check. You can just say, okay, you go over there and you give it a good look, and roll for that. There are ways to sort of get around that.
Yeah, you can definitely, as Estelle Castillo points out, you can definitely finesse what players focus on by describing something more, making it sound more interesting than it is, etc.
Yeah.
I guess I have 2 points on this. One is a really great piece of advice that stuck with me is players can remember 3 things, right? So anytime you're describing a room and you've described more than 3 things, they've lost something, whether you want them to or not. So, I mean, you can use that to your advantage and pile on a bunch of stuff, but then you're invariably they're gonna go, well, wait a minute now. Okay, so there was a barrel, a chair, a chest, 3 columns, and then what else? There was a desk. We go check out the desk.
Yeah, right.
But 3 units of information is sort of like the cognitive load that most players can carry, and if you go more or less than that, you're sort of swaying in favor of one thing or the other, right? Yeah. So keep that in mind. I think the other thing is, so a new GM had a question about a player who walks in every room and wants to make a perception check and expects to see something that's hidden. I mean, the classic way to so Christian Linky has a good solution to that, which is you're making perception checks, and if you want to do more involved searches, then that's going to start eating away at time. If you don't want to progress in an orderly fashion through the dungeon, that's fine, but otherwise you're only going to be allowed to move at half your speed and da-da-da-da. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you can also say, I assume you're doing that, and I have taken that into account with your passive perception. And that really is the function of passive perception. Mm-hmm. So I'd really lean on that.
It's a good
that mechanic, so that you're not stopping play every time so that person rolls a dice. It's important to recognize this person really loves rolling dice. Okay, let's incorporate that in a variety of ways rather than like they just keep rolling dice and they want to be the master thief who sees and knows all, right?
Right.
The other thing to do is give them like a robe of eyes. That does make them the master of seeing all. That nothing's hidden. They see all the invisible creatures. Also, they can't ever turn it off. So if they run into a creature with a gaze attack, they're screwed. I'm not saying punish them because they want to be that character, but you can afford them the opportunity of like, you are the oracle who is walking in the woods. The final point that I wanted to make about this whole topic, because we do have to wrap up, is I don't think there's one answer, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think you should feel bound to use any type of skill or ability check in one particular way all the time. And we talked about this last week. Oftentimes, I know there's something I want the party to discover. Mm-hmm. I will call for a perception check or an intelligence investigation, whichever you prefer. They all roll. All that roll tells me is who at the table figured it out or noticed the thing. They were going to find it anyhow, but everybody got to make a roll, so they all felt like they had a quote-unquote equal chance or somewhat of a chance. And then the person who rolled the highest, whom it may be a surprise to you that the low intelligence ranger made this particular check, and then boom, they get the piece of information. Hopefully they share it with the other characters or whatever, but it's just a chance to bring the kind of the mechanics to the table and shake things up a little bit, rather than always going, well, you have the highest passive perception, so you noticed blah, blah, blah. So that's a way in which I call for a blanket ability check that is not based on anyone's action or anything specific that they said they have been doing. I will retroactively narrate some action that might explain why she rolled a 3 when normally she has the highest perception, or, you know, he has many ranks in Arcana but didn't know that this was a magical effect or whatever. So sometimes I'll retroactively say, oh, you had your nose in your book and you weren't paying attention, or you were distracted by a bird that flew by, or whatever it was, something that seems in character, not too outside the realm of the norm. But that does retroactively paint in the picture of this is what's going on in the fiction of the world, right, as opposed to just roll and go.
Right.
So your words are the game. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And whether you use them ahead of the mechanics and the dice rolls, or after the mechanics of the dice rolls, is irrelevant. Your words are the game. I encourage you to come up with new and different ways of deploying them, and inspired ways to make the scene come alive. So. Yeah, and it's nice, like James V points out, your players will often take that over from you. We'll go like, oh yeah, no, I rolled a 3. I'm looking at this cool rock over here, or I'm having lunch, or I'm thinking about having lunch, or whatever it is, right? So, yeah, that's.
Yep. That's
a nice, solid discussion of a topic that comes up all too often in our own games. All right, so if you want to see how this plays out tomorrow night, I encourage you to join us tomorrow at 8 here on Saving Throw Show.
Please do. Tell your friends.
Tell your friends and neighbors. Are we going to be front paged again?
I don't know.
Who knows? We had last week off, right?
Yeah, but my partner manager, if you're watching, I don't think you are. Yeah. Hey, look. It even has our name on the back.
It even says Saving Throw Show on the back. Number 17.
Yeah.
The same number of months that James V
Nope.
has been subbed up.
Nope.
-3.
Okay. That's a weird way.
I finessed it. That's
You
called
did.
finesse.
That's a level 3 dungeon.
I tell my wife that's called bringing it around. Bringing it around. You started over here. I was giving a toast at a friend's wedding, and we're at the reception, and I said, you know, the great thing I did not realize about being married is that you become more like the other person, and sometimes that's for better. And there's a very pregnant pause. I was like, and sometimes you take a different path. It's always been for better. Always for better. Trust me, always for better. So tomorrow night at 8, Iron Keep Chronicles.
Yeah.
It's our D&D game. We
That's
may or
true.
may not be on the front page, so we may or may not have a bunch of new people in the chat. We would like to see you in the chat, regardless. We would like to see you in the chat tonight at 8 o'clock. We have another installment of our Starfinder game.
That's true.
Is Tyler still sitting in the DM's console? GM's console?
He would be if he weren't in Hawaii right now.
Boo! Boo! Oh, okay. I like volcanic glass and acid made with seawater.
Yep. It's true. That happens in Hawaii.
That's
but Dan Peck, who plays the android Twill, will be in the GM seat. And we have a full complement of the Garnet Laser Brash Death crew will be here.
What is a full complement? 18, 25?
Well, the Garnet Laser Brash Death is not a big ship.
Oh, okay.
So 5 is what that means.
I see. Tabletop Tales, don't worry. If you can't join us tonight at 8 Pacific Live, you can join us tomorrow at 3 o'clock Pacific for the rerun of tonight's session.
It's true. It's true. It will be back on at 3 o'clock, and it will also be on YouTube. Should be around that time as well. And then, yes, at 8 o'clock tomorrow is Iron Keep.
Even though it's not on the calendar that I'm looking at right now.
I know, that has not been updated yet.
No, very much not so.
But Thursday is off.
Not disorganized play. So somebody's been slacking on the calendar here, huh?
Yeah.
Yes, you can just go to !calendar.
Yeah.
and check it out.
And Friday is Wildcards. If you guys are going to go to Gen Con, or you know someone going to Gen Con,
Which is not far away anymore.
No.
I might.
it's happening. It's really rushing in quickly. We will be at Gen Con. We'll be all over the place. But if you do !Gen Con, you'll pull up our official schedule at Gen Con. And there's probably going to be some more fun things that will be going on there as well. So I hope you guys can come and make it.
There's a ton of streaming stuff going on. In fact, we were just mentioned in the Gen Con newsletter as part of the streaming lineup.
It's true. Yep.
So come check out the show. I will not be there, but Dom and a whole bunch of Amy and Havana,
Jordan, Megan,
Garav,
Gaurav,
Blah,
Stephen
blah, blah.
Pope, David Crennan,
Tyler,
Rick Bear, a bunch of people will be there. Eric as well.
Am I the only one from Saving Throw who's not going?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it should be a lot of fun, a lot of cool stuff. And our show, our live stream show, there is a Wildcards episode. It's
But also
raising money for Extra Life.
a charity stream.
A charity stream. So, I hope that you guys can come. Even if you can't come and watch it live, sitting in the audience, you can watch it online on the official Gen Con Twitch. And still also contribute to Extra Life and help us raise money for that important cause and change things that go on in the game.
Dun dun dun.
So there you go.
Hey, so thank you so much for joining me. We had a great discussion today. I think I'm interested to see what's happening, how tomorrow night's session works out. I will not be at Gen Con this year, so I'm not going to the Diana Jones
Yeah, I
Awards.
think I get in a little too late for Diana Jones. So
That's
I don't
Wednesday night.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it.
It's never too late for Diana Jones, Dom. That's a party that don't stop.
It's too late for me.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
After my flight. But yeah, so I will. Yeah, I do have an invite to Diana Jones, so
Awesome.
if I can make it, I will make it. But I don't know.
So I hope you will tune in tomorrow night to watch all of the cool action and help influence the events as they play out. We'll see how dirty, deadly, and dangerous it gets. I think there will also be not just the combat, but we'll also advance the storyline, hopefully at least a little bit. You know, the one missing piece out of all of this is what ways can you incorporate into the combat or direct results of it that reveals more information about the greater plot as a whole. That's a challenge every time, and I think it's a really tough challenge with combat, because generally it does not. Now, we've revealed that he's a demon. Okay, great. And then that kind of solves part of our mystery, right? But at any rate, please join us tomorrow night or catch us on the VOD. I encourage you to do so. I want to thank Farquaad and the rest of all of our mods for keeping the channel safe, friendly, clean, and accessible. Thanks to everyone who's a Patreon backer who donated bits today during the show. Thanks to James V for subbing up and giving me a little reroll for tomorrow night. I will deploy that strategically and yell in your face when I use it.
Okay,
I don't know.
Wouldn't recommend it.
I may or may not. Yeah, that's the kind of aggro move you don't want to pull with this table.
Yeah.
To be fair, know your players, right? The golden rule is know your players. So catch us tomorrow then. Until next time, let's dungeon. Well, that wasn't very heavy metal, Dom. Couldn't you at least give like a howling scream or something?